Hello, and welcome to Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. I am always keen to hear your feedback, particularly in relation to the kinds of leaders you would like me to invite onto the show in future. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rich insights from our special guest. Hello and welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. I'm delighted that Lucy Darch has joined me in the studio today. Lucy, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really looking forward to hearing your story today. So from people that actually watch the show regularly, they will know that we always ask you firstly just to introduce yourself, who you are and where your current focus is, please.
Okay, I'm Lucy Darch. I'm the CEO of Wave. Wave is a water retail business in the non-household water supply market.
Super, that's very clear. And just talk to us a little bit about when you're not working and being a very busy CEO, what is it you do outside of work?
Outside of work, I have 4 horses, so I'm equestrian crazy. I've got a dog. I like being outside. I like doing things around the horses, dog walks. I like running, cycling. So yeah, I'm very outdoors based when I'm not at work.
And have you ever competed with the horses?
When I was younger, yes, but now it's more of a hobby and just fun.
They're just fantastic creatures, aren't they? So respectful of them. But we may come back to that later on, which is lovely. So let's start then by understanding a bit about your earlier journey in life. Talk to us about those childhood experiences that shape your early leadership style.
Okay. Yeah, so just reflecting back on my childhood, I was born in 1970. My parents were relatively old when I was born. So my mum was 38 and my dad was 44. And they were in the process of setting up a agricultural business and an agricultural machinery dealership at the time. So I think I was a very ill-timed child, arriving at a very busy time for my parents. When my mum found out she was pregnant, she apparently announced to the household that we were all having this baby because they just didn't really know how it was going to fit into their lives. And so I think that there was kind of 2 perspectives on it. My godmother said that she wondered whether I got fed at times because there was so much going on and it was often, where's Lucy, where's Lucy? But for me, I did feel kind of quite a lot of benefit in a way because I flew under the radar a lot of the time. So I had days where I just did my own thing. I was outside in the garden. I wasn't sort of totally feral, but I just kind of did my own thing. I remember making my own lunches. I reflect back at things like making sandwiches and not really knowing how to make sandwiches. So I had sandwiches which were sort of bread and vinegar, things like that. Yeah, just had lots and lots of free time and lots of scope and kind of nobody really knowing kind of what I was up to. And I've really enjoyed it. And so when I look back now at kind of how happy I was with that arrangement, it has sort of translated into me really appreciating autonomy in my work life and, having the freedom to kind of experiment. And it's translated as well into kind of the type of roles that I really enjoy are very ambiguous and, kind of roles that start with a blank piece of paper and say, okay, we don't really have anything. You go away and work out how to tackle this. That really ticks all my boxes.
Excellent. And obviously, when we become teenagers and we start to think about our careers and look forward, did you have at any early point a dream or something that you knew you wanted to do in life?
So that's a difficult question. I mean, I think when I was younger, I knew that I wanted to get out of Shropshire. So Shropshire's, it's a beautiful county, but it's very rural. I felt that I was very kind of away from the arts and culture and kind of opportunities like that. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And I think because of my parents, neither of my parents went to universities. I think to them, for example, I don't think they were ever aware of me choosing my O-level options or choosing my A-level options, or, the fact that I might go to university just wasn't ever a thing really for them. And so when eventually I did decide to go to university and I went down to Oxford Brookes, it was completely new territory really for them. So I think when I got to Oxford Brookes, I kind of just felt like I would take an opportunity that sounded of interest, kind of when it came up. I don't think I was particularly structured about it. So when I left university, I ended up working for Friends Provident and learning all about things which, when you're in your early 20s, you just don't know about: life assurance and pensions and mortgages and all of that. And it actually set me up quite nicely, I think, because during that time, my landlord went bankrupt, and the financial advisors at Friends Providence sort of said, well, now's a really good time to buy if you wanted to buy. We can give you all the advice and we can help you. So, I ended up in my early 20s buying a flat, sort of setting myself up in Oxford. And I didn't really discover utilities until the mid 90s, when I started working for the outfit, which was eventually bought by Enron Direct and became Enron Direct in the UK. So, and that's when I kind of found my love for utilities, because I think you've got to have kind of quite a lot of inner geek to want to be in utilities, because it's a lot of data and process. And, that's where I kind of found my love of utilities.
And what I love about utilities, because I used to work in one as well many years ago, is that it's almost like, the electricity, isn't it? You don't really notice it's a problem until it's not there. And obviously you have to respond then as a utility, in that sense that we've seen recently as well with some of the issues around the water. So we'll come to that, but I just want to stay in the 20s a little bit, because I'm really conscious of the fact that obviously you're not giving us all the information, but it sounds like your parents were extremely busy and weren't necessarily taking a keen interest in terms of your immediate future around university. And you were used to that independence and that need to get out of Shropshire. So how does that manifest in terms of some of the challenges you faced in your 20s, just from a leadership perspective? Bear in mind, that's what the kind of environment you brought up in.
Yeah, I guess the type of person that I became was, I guess, kind of somebody who was used to being very authentic, very uncontrolled, and having a lot of autonomy. And that does present problems in the workplace, because, sometimes that doesn't fit with how workplaces work. And I think one of the cultural issues at Enron was that everyone was very young. I think I worked out at one point the average age was 35 in the entire business. So we didn't really have a lot of maturity in the leadership population, and I wasn't a leader at that point. And so things used to get quite if there was a business issue and things weren't going well, nobody conducted themselves very well either. And so it was really tricky. And there were tears and there were raised voices, and there was, I reflect back at it and think we actually achieved an awful lot in that business, but it was quite a difficult business to be in. And I think one of the things that, and a kind of other skill that I learned along the way, was around resilience and adaptability, because, you couldn't take offense at all the things that were being said, because there was a lot of mudslinging going on, but there was also quite a lot of achieving and high performance going on. And actually, if you could adapt to the feedback you were getting and be resilient, you could just keep on being really effective. And so I think I became the sales director there at quite a young age. And I think it was just because I learned how to be a part of that culture, even though the culture wasn't ideal, wasn't something that I would choose. I learned how to adapt to being in it.
I love that background. And then when you became the sales director, obviously high pressure environment, the sales director is the one that always the book stops at in terms of obviously the commercial side of it. So how did you cope personally with that pressure in that role at that point?
Yeah, it was really pressured. And I think I think what I started to realize is that, then it's all about the people you've got around you. And so, making sure that the team was as strong as it possibly could be. And, I think I've kind of built a lot of relationships over the years. And, some of the relationships are still there now. Now that you've mentioned it, I'm going out for dinner on Friday with one of the people who was very much my right hand at that time, And so so it was important to have people who were talented, who were aiming high, who were really, really motivated to kind of hit the targets. And we always got very, very stretching targets, and we always had quite a lot of challenges, so entering new markets, I think I've mentioned ambiguity quite a lot, but entering new markets, there is a lot of uncertainty about how things are going to work. And, when we entered the electricity market, we were offering a discount to the electricity providers who'd previously been providing to the businesses. And then we were translating those into tariffs. Effectively, it was kind of working backwards to create what would be our tariffs, because we didn't know what other people were charging in the market, and there was no way of knowing. And so, it was just trying to be creative, and kind of solving problems in a creative way, which I think worked really well for us. And so when Enron went spectacularly bankrupt in the late 90s, early 2000s, I think I was standing on a trade stall in the NEC, and someone came onto the stall and said, over in the US, things have gone really bad with Enron. Come on, let's go out for lunch, kind of thing. So off we went. And, just reflecting on the change that was going to come there, we'd actually done really well in the UK. And there was a lot of irony in it, because the US saw the UK market as quite a risk, because we were dealing with end user customers. And so they always had us quite high on the risk register, and were saying, this operation is quite high risk for us. So we were kind of like, okay, that's quite ironic the way this has all panned out. But we had most of the energy companies trying to buy the business, because they all knew we had about 200,000 SME customers, all contracted for 5 years on fixed prices with back-to-back hedges. So there was nothing really risky about it. And we were sold to British Gas. It was at that point where my eyes were really opened into, the change, the different sort of organisation that was. There were literally school leavers there. There were people who were approaching retirement. There were engineers. There's every type of person in British Gas. And it was like a big family, and it was a much more supportive organisation, with a completely different culture. But the bit that I will always have as probably my number one moment in business was when the previous MD of Enron, on the day that we sold the business to British Gas, he got everyone into the contact centre. He stood up on a contact centre desk, and he basically said, right, this is a difficult time for all of you, but he said, what you need to remember is that we know everything about the electricity market, and the British Gas team doesn't. And that there's a reason why they've bought us, and they've bought us for not just for the customer contracts, but for your knowledge. So he said, from this moment on, imagine we've bought them. And that's how I went forward. I just imagined that we'd bought them. So during the integration, loads of the Enron team ended up being kind of very senior in the integration phase, because we just said what we knew, and we were really confident.
And what I'm really interested in there is kind of the people who have experienced this or are about to experience it. When you're used to being authentic in that independent, really challenging environment, going into a more paternal culture, even though you've got that attitude, just talk to us about some of the challenges you faced personally about adapting to that.
Yeah, I felt the pace slowed down, and I felt like people were much more considered. Things were, meetings took longer, decisions took longer, lots more process, lots more protocol. There was an element of feeling a little bit relieved, because at the time I was pregnant. I was pregnant with twins. And I think, I did recognise instantly that this was a much better environment to be a mother in. But yeah, some frustrations with, pace and the way that, I guess the way that risks were managed. But I did start to understand it fairly quickly, in that it was to do with scale. And I think, when you're a new entrant and you're, fast paced, trying to build a book of customers, trying to kind of build a brand and all of that, it's a very different way of operating to when you're, you're turning over in the B2B area, hundreds of millions of pounds, and you're a very stable brand, and you're a very recognized brand. You do have to operate differently. And I kind of learned that very quickly, and to see that, the types of things that Enron would do were not necessarily the types of things that British Gas would do, because the customer impact, the brand impact, and, kind of answering to the shareholders who, was a very different way of operating, I think, in that organisation.
Yeah, I love that. So talk to us about the next maybe 5 to 10 years. Obviously, you went off and had your twins, and just talk about that next stage of your life from a career perspective, and again, from
Yeah, so I was really lucky when I came back from mat leave to have kind of 2 or 3 options at British Gas, and I guess that's another thing that wouldn't have happened at Enron. So way bigger organisation, lots of options to come back to, so 3 jobs to choose from. I had very sort of comical meeting because I was allowed a 3-minute slot, I think, with Sir Mike Alexander, who was the chairman of British Gas, and I was asked what I wanted to do with my career. I don't think I've ever been very good at that, to be honest. And I just sort of said, I just want to enjoy every day, want to give as much as I can give. It wasn't the kind of answer he was looking for. I think he was looking for me to pin myself on a job. When you've got 3 minutes, it's a bit strange, isn't it? But I chose to go into the IMC team, so the Industrial and Commercial Customer team. And I joined as the head of sales and retention. It felt like a massive change to me because obviously I was dealing with much larger customers. So we supplied the Ministry of Defence with gas, for example. And, there was a lot of critical infrastructure in there. There was a lot more, the contracts felt a lot more important. And I had a team of people working for me who all were really experienced, more on the gas side than the power side. And we were looking to not only retain the customers, but also to kind of grow the customer book. And so British Gas had obviously, since 1995, when the market had opened, they'd been losing customers. And so we very arrogantly decided we were going to have a win back campaign, and we were just going to go back to everyone that had left, and we were going to say, look, now that we've joined forces with Enron, we can do gas, we can do electricity, we've got all these new systems, we've got all this great team. And we were so successful. We took the business from about 300 million turnover to over 1 billion in about 5 years. And it was a fantastic time and a really enjoyable time because of the culture that was there, and, high performing, but very trusting and very calm, but also very much more understanding of the needs of the workforce, which I'd never really been in that environment before, so policies around maternity leave and, kind of just lots of enrichment, I think I'd describe it as. And that's definitely something that I've looked to bring with me throughout my career, is just how much I appreciated that. And also much more, I guess, emphasis on recognition and reward, which I'd never really been in that environment before as well. And so, I was happily awarded the Chris Weston Award one year for my performance, and just feeling absolutely delighted to be acknowledged in that way. And so I think, things that I've brought with me from British Gas around, kind of recognition, appreciation, and that kind of enrichment, and just how it makes you feel in an organisation, and then also how it makes you want to behave in an organisation. Because I think if you feel appreciated and you feel enriched, then you just want to give. You just want to give more back. And so, in my current job, we definitely try to create that type of culture.
Excellent. And we'll come back to that in a second. And I'm all thinking now, I'm aware of British Gas as well, just from my background. Even though the environment is very different to Enron, which you've described, what's the one thing that you can look back on during your time at British Gas where maybe it seemed like a setback at the time for you, potentially, whatever it was, but actually looking back at it, it was a gift?
I guess, yeah, I've definitely got one of those. So it's a funny situation because there's a lot of things in business now which are about sort of, in British Gas, it used to be high potential people that were identified. And I think it morphed into high potential females that were identified. I was identified as a high potential female in British Gas, and I was invited to go on a mentoring program. And I was kind of skeptical about how it was going to work. And I went into it, and I was matched with a gentleman called Chris Proctor, who was the Chief Scientific Officer at British American Tobacco. And we didn't really have a lot in common other than our love of wine, which we'd both put on the form. So anyway, we met up. Turned out his daughter was at Oxford University. You know, we had loads in common when we got talking. And Chris is the man behind Smoking Kills. The message Smoking Kills. So from within an organisation that retailed tobacco, he'd found that their product was killing people, which, you know, can you imagine being in that situation and then having to go and tell the board, you know, this is awkward, isn't it? We're actually killing people. And so what I learned from Chris was like that, you know, that he'd really successfully pushed that message within the organisation. And I think we're talking now sort of 2015, so 10 years ago, was predicting that, you know, nobody would be smoking cigarettes. It would all be vapes. It would all be something else. And in 2015, 2016, that felt unlikely. But he was completely right. And so he had really great characteristics. He was very bold. He was very decisive. And he kind of really had this strong sense of what was right. And at that time, I was headhunted by Northumbrian Water to go and set up the non-household market for the water market that was deregulating. And it felt, you know, like almost a bridge too far, you know, with the 256-mile commute. I wasn't sure it was going to be the right answer for me. But Chris was absolutely sure. He was, this is it. This is it. You know, this is definitely what you should be doing. And so he just, you know, we had a big conversation about why would you not do it? Why would you do it? You know, we went all through it. And eventually I decided I was doing it. And I really haven't looked back on that decision. So even though something that British Gas provided to me actually ended up in me leaving the organisation, it was such the right thing for me. And I really, really appreciate, you know, that experience that they gave me.
Excellent. So talk to us about the last decade, and in particular, I'm interested, obviously, the autonomy piece, obviously the role that you have now, and how, again, your leadership style has changed as you've become.
Yeah. So I think it's becoming a mother and kind of, you know, nurturing and bringing up people. It does change your view on the world a little, I think. And I did go through quite a difficult phase actually at Northumbrian Water, because there was, you know, we decided to try and do a joint venture and enter the market with Anglian Water as well, and, you know, kind of have a much bigger operating model. But also, one of the things I hadn't really appreciated is being a startup and having 300,000 customers on day one is really, really tough. The toughest thing I ever done. Lots of sleepless nights, lots of stress, lots of worries. You know, building a new team, literally being the first person through the door and building a team around me, and doing it in the Northeast where, you know, all of my contacts are around Oxford, you know, so it was really, really difficult, really difficult. And at the same time, you know, there was quite a few family pressures as well. And so I think I went through that sort of classic feeling like you're failing at everything moment, where you think, right, I'm not doing very well at work. You know, there's piles of things to do here. I'm failing my family. My son had said to somebody that it was great when mum was at home because he had a cooked meal then. And it made me think, oh, no, that's not a great thing to hear, because I was in Durham sort of 4 days a week. And yeah, it just felt like I was failing in every direction. And you do have to kind of then just track back and think, okay, you know, what's the plan here? And I think, you know, it was once again about bringing in talent and making sure that you trust and empower people, because, you know, you can't do everything yourself. And if you're going to be a strong leader, you need to have strong leaders around you. And I think, you know, that was kind of the point at which things tipped, was when I was able to kind of literally say, okay, that piece is actually yours, you know, and you're going to do that. I'm not going to think about that anymore. And that's when things started to kind of improve, I think. But it's been a really tricky market, because the market opened in April 2017. And then, of course, in March 2020, we had COVID. So I think things were just getting on their feet in that kind of 1 to 3 year period. I think Wave had just started to make a profit in March 2020. And then Boris Johnson told lots of businesses to close and everybody to go home. And so we had another couple of years that were really, really tough. So it has been a really tough a really tough period, but actually it's trying to find the good in things. That's kind of always, I feel like I am the eternal optimist. I'm always trying to find the green shoots, the good bits, and trying to find where are the good bits. Let's just concentrate on the good bits and seeing the good in everyone and trying to kind of make, just keep putting as much nourishment into that goodness. And actually, COVID turned out to be a really good thing for us because it taught us that we can do this from home. We can therefore allow people much more flexibility in their roles. So we took a decision very early on after kind of a few months of working from home. We said, okay, this actually feels quite good, doesn't it? Let's hold on to the good bits. If people are doing the school run or they've got a dog now and they're taking the dog for a walk at lunchtime, or they're just appreciating the fact they're not having an hour's commute at the morning and the evening, let's never go back. Let's make sure we never go back. And so that's what we've done. And we've given up our offices in Durham and Peterborough. We've downsized massively. So we've gone from 180 desks in Durham down to 40. And we've gone from about 180 desks in Peterborough down to about 20. People have got an office space if they want to network and meet, but we just haven't gone back. So there are challenges with that, obviously, in terms of bringing in new people and kind of all the people having time to get to know each other. But we work really hard at that element. So we work really hard now at team meetings, team days, company days, but we also give back that flexibility on a week-to-week basis where people can have more control over their time, more control over what they do. And I'm really happy when I hear people can't make my meeting 3 till 4 because they're doing the school run. I think I'm actually really pleased with that because I think that's great. Okay, let's do it at 4 till 5 when you're back. That's fine. Just things like that. I think it meant the world to me to have that freedom and that autonomy, and I love the fact that I'm giving that to other people now.
It's really interesting, and I'll follow up with a question there. There are many CEOs that are listening to this, and I deal with a lot of them, the ones that I coach, who are of a certain age, both men and women, mostly in their 50s, where even though they wouldn't say it openly, there's quite a lot of resentment that's been building up about the new generation that are coming through that are demanding this more flexible way of working, and almost as, hold on, I had to do the hard yards you experienced at Enron as well. How do you circumnavigate that? There's so much around I see at the moment. What's your view on that, and how to approach it?
I would always fight an argument with data. So our attendance figures are 97%. We've never had that level of attendance when we were office based. And I put that down to, if you're feeling just a bit off, it might stop you getting in the car and driving for half an hour, 45 minutes. But if you just knew that you were at home, logged in, kind of able to have a coffee, sit, just maybe work at 10% less, and feel a bit better that way, then that's what people do. And so we definitely get better attendance. We've got better productivity, and I think that's because of the level of appreciation. People really like the freedom and the flexibility and the way they can plan their days. And so what we found is we've got better, wherever we manage or look at the data around what we're managing to achieve more with less people. And so that feels like people are giving a bit more back, which is great. So I think, better attendance, better productivity, really great engagement score. So we measure our engagement scores through a company called We Thrive. We get 98% of people fill it in. There's always a couple that don't fill it in. They might be on mat leave, I guess. But, we try and get everyone to fill it in. But our engagement level is 82%, which is absolutely record beating. And so I just don't think you can argue with it. You get a new starter who sort of says, I found it took a bit of time to get to know my team. I think that's the bit you have to put the effort into. So, have the team just having a 30-minute coffee on the screen, or having a team day, getting everyone in, which we encourage, at least quarterly. Just helps the new starters kind of, oh, that's who you are. I know who you are. Just go into the office, and because we're a hybrid organisation, it's all hot desks. turns out you're in a desk next to someone you don't know, just say hello to them. What team are you in? And so actually, I think people know more people in other teams that way. So yeah, I would say it's just, it doesn't work for everyone. I know that, but for us, it does definitely work. And I think, it also helps our carbon footprint. So we have less people driving, we have less people on trains, we've got less office emissions. So it's helpful from that respect as well. So which I always like. So yeah, I think whilst I appreciate it's not for everyone, I know that a lot of companies are requiring people back. We are not requiring people back.
And it's a really interesting point, because even though I agree with what you're saying, it is the actual next generation that will decide how companies will work, not the leaders of those companies currently. So one final question for you, Lucy, and it's always one I like to finish with. We're always developing as leaders, and we're always learning with the next challenge how we need to become more effective. So what's left for you? And if you think about the next year or two with all the challenges you might be facing, what is it that you've got to work on in terms of your own leadership capability?
Yeah, that's a really good one. So I think I'm starting to think about, kind of having the strength in my leadership team to give the business resilience as some of my leadership team start to retire. So we've got to that stage now where we're thinking about succession planning and we're thinking about what next. And at the same time, we're thinking about the point that you raised last one about culture and how culture transcends the leaders in the business. So culture will change, but I think for us, what we need to kind of define is what is the core of our culture that we don't really want to change, and what bits will kind of adjust to the new leadership team as people do retire and the new leaders come in. So that's the bit. And I think, particularly around equality and diversity and inclusion, and kind of how those need to be reflected on our values and our purpose and our leadership skills as well. So that's kind of the chapter that we're looking at and how we get that right.
Well, Lucy, it's been delightful to hear your journey today. I love the aspect of this firstly independent individual who got out of Shropshire and obviously succeeded well in an environment which allowed her to thrive like that, and yet embraced and adapted to this paternal environment, which then rounded you out as a leader and then led you to obviously making the choice to be where you are now. So I've really enjoyed listening to you. And once again, thank you, Lucy, for being on the show today.
Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can access all previous episodes of the show at confessionsofaSuccessfulLeader.com. If you are interested in finding out more about conscious leadership and self-coaching, just type in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or your favorite browser, and you'll find my contact details and all the content that you need. Until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious.